Before the world knew him as a celebrated director, Ron Howard Wastelevision's favorite son. The wide-eyed boy whose smile could make an entire country believe in goodness again. But fame, especially for a child, comes with invisible chains. Behind the laughter of sitcoms and the applause of audiences, Howard's real life was far more complicated. Family tension, hidden exhaustion, and the pressure to live up to his image followed him from childhood into adulthood. For years, he kept it all locked away, refusing to reveal the truth that nearly broke him until Atlas he did. These are the secrets Ron Howard tried to keep hidden from fans for decades, the perfect son of America. For decades, Ron Howard has occupied a singular space in America's collective imagination. He became the nation's child, the embodiment of innocence and simple goodness. Almost as soon as his face appeared on black and white television screens, the country saw him first as Opie Taylor, the red-haired son of Sheriff Andy Taylor in the Andy Griffith Show, a gentle, trusting boy with a freckled face and wide, unguarded eyes. His very presence became a kind of reassurance in a turbulent age, proof that small-town decency was real and could last. Yet beneath the flawless exterior, a far more complicated story was unfolding. Ron Howard's entry into show business was not the result of idle dreams, but of family lineage and relentless industry. His parents, Rance and Gene Howard, were both working actors who understood Hollywood's rewards and its dangers. They wanted stability for their son, but also believed in his potential. Early on, they coached him through auditions and screen tests, providing love and discipline in equal measure. But even, they could not shield him from the machinery of fame. Television success arrived with startling speed and intensity. Howard was only 6 years old when he was cast as Opie, and in the years that followed, he became a fixture in American homes. Fame, however, was no gentle visitor. It attached itself to his life with a grip that would never loosen. Every studio executive, every director, every audience member wanted the same thing, for Ron to remain perpetually sweet, perpetually flawless. On set, he was expected to deliver his lines with precision, to hit his marks and smile on cue. Offset. There was little room for childhood mischief or error. Even his downtime was subject to the invisible rules of celebrity. Mistakes were quietly discouraged, and disappointment was rarely expressed out loud. Cameras were always rolling in spirit, if not in fact, and every performance was supposed to be faultless. In public, he projected warmth and humility. In private, he reportedly quietly absorbed the exhaustion, anxiety, and ever-present pressure to uphold an ideal that had been projected onto him before he could fully understand it. Over the years, silence became his shield. Years later, he would reportedly admit, "I was forced to hide this." He wasn't referring to scandal or rebellion, but to the emotional toll of constant performance, the impossibility of ever truly letting his guard down. The man who would become one of America's most beloved actors and directors began his career as a boy learning to disappear behind a perfect mask, the mask of America's perfect son. Can a boy ever be just a boy when every glance and gesture is under scrutiny? For Ron, the answer was anything but simple. A childhood built on cues. The Howard family was an island of order amid the chaos of the entertainment industry. Rance Howard was a man of deep integrity and quiet ambition. Determined to give his son both protection and structure, Gene Howard balanced artistic passion with maternal vigilance, providing warmth and encouragement, even as she mapped out schedules and managed logistics. The home they created was filled with both affection and expectation. Scripts were scattered on the kitchen table. Family dinners were sometimes held in the quiet aftermath of long days spent under the lights. For Ron, childhood existed almost entirely within the orbit of the set. While other children lost themselves in playground games, Ron was learning the intricacies of timing, the beat between a setup and a punchline, the subtlety of a glance, the importance of memorizing dialogue word for word. He became fluent in the grammar of the stage before he could recite his own home phone number. Every emotion had to be calibrated, every gesture practiced until it could withstand the scrutiny of directors and audiences alike. Hollywood offered undeniable advantages: financial security, national fame, a measure of influence that most adults never experience. But each benefit was counterbalanced by a sacrifice. True childhood, with all its messiness and unfiltered emotion, was a luxury Ron could not afford. His classmates rarely treated him as a peer. He was the boy from television, the one who always seemed mature beyond his years, the kid who could never quite join in with the group. Adults on set, meanwhile, treated him like a miniature professional, correcting his tone and posture with gentle insistence, always steering him back to the role. This life left little space for Ron to be anything less than composed. Outbursts and confusion were quietly discouraged. Gratitude and politeness were non-negotiable. The world around him rewarded steadiness and punished vulnerability. As the years passed, these lessons calcified into habits. Ron Howard learned to master chaos on set, to direct with composure and grace, but privately he remained cautious, conflict-averse, and emotionally guarded. The world celebrated his calm genius, but the boy within him never stopped wondering when he might finally be allowed to simply stop performing. The mask had kept him safe, but soon it would come with a cost he hadn't yet imagined. The price of being Opie. The role of Opie Taylor elevated Ron Howard into the realm of television legend before he could truly comprehend what that meant. Andy Griffith, the show's charismatic lead, served not just as an on-screen father, but as a mentor and guide, offering the kind of gentle support that was rare in the high-pressure world of entertainment. Yet this kindness and the tidal wave of affection from audiences brought its own suffocating weight. Fans blurred the line between character and actor. Strangers stopped him in the street, expecting to meet Opie, the humble, obedient, unblemished boy of Mayberry. This confusion between self and character grew more burdensome as Ron got older. The attention that once felt flattering now became an inescapable spotlight. Griffith's genuine mentorship was a gift, but the world surrounding the show seemed determined to keep Ron frozen in time. Forever the sweet, naive boy from a perfect small town. Producers and casting directors could see only Opie, not a maturing actor ready to tackle more complicated roles. Every media interview circled back to the same anecdotes about wholesome values and childhood wisdom, locking him into a narrative he could not control. By the time he entered adolescence, Ron Howard had already outgrown the image America still cherished. When the Andy Griffith Show ended and he transitioned to Happy Days, it was meant to signal a new beginning. Instead, the expectations followed him. The wholesome persona persisted. His new character was still safe, still likable, still the embodiment of everything America wanted to believe about itself. The double life continued. The dependable public figure, trusted and familiar, versus the private individual yearning for invisibility, longing for the freedom to be unknown if only for a while. In every chapter of his early life, Ron Howard carried the invisible cost of America's adoration. The boy who never let anyone down became the man who quietly wondered who he might have become if he had ever been allowed to let go. He had played the perfect boy for years. But what happens when the world refuses to let you grow up? A star without a voice. Hollywood in the late 1960s and early 1970s was a place unrecognizable from the world Ron Howard had entered as a child. The old studio system had dissolved, leaving uncertainty in its wake. Icons were falling, genres shifting, and an industry once defined by glossy fantasy began to crave authenticity, rebellion, and the edge of counterculture. In this atmosphere, innocence was no longer an asset. Clean-cut faces, once the ticket to stardom, now marked actors as relics of a fading era. For Ron Howard, this change felt like exile. He watched the transformation from the inside, feeling its effect more acutely than most. He was barely 20, but carried a lifetime of expectations. The freckled, earnest boy from the Andy Griffith Show had been beloved by millions as Opie Taylor. But now, every role that made him a household name boxed him in, keeping doors shut even Ash tried to break through. He experimented with his look, longer hair, bell-bottoms, and jackets that hinted at a new identity. Ron's frustrations mounted. He was young, ambitious, and desperate to be more than a childhood memory. Each rejection brought new bitterness, a feeling rare for someone known for patience and humility. But he learned quickly that Hollywood had nous for the polite or the gentle. Outwardly, he adapted. Inwardly, he seethed at the inescapable typecasting. The persona of Opie became a kind of shackle. His public identity suffocating, the private self struggling to mature. It was then that he found a new path. Directing. Here was a world where he could shape stories rather than simply perform them. Directing meant controlling the ability to craft narratives from the ground up. Yet even as he poured himself into this discipline, the residue of his childhood image lingered. He was cautious on set, meticulously prepared, unfailingly polite. But beneath the professionalism, he allegedly hid a private resentment. He never asked for the image others projected onto him. He merely played the part he was given. The composure he brought to directing was more than a method. It was self-preservation, an armor forged in the fires of a childhood spent performing, of always having to appear calm, even as he quietly suffered the weight of being misunderstood. For years, he had hidden behind composure and decency. But stepping onto the set of American Graffiti would test whether the armor he built could survive a world that no longer cared who he once was. The graffiti years. American Graffiti offered Ron Howard his first real chance to step out of the shadows of Opie Taylor. Cast as Steve Blander, a teenager wrestling with the uncertain promises of adulthood, Ron hoped the role would mark his arrival as a legitimate adult actor. The director, George Lucas, believed in his ability to embody the push-pull between nostalgia and rebellion, a motive at the heart of the film. But their reality on set was brutal. The cast was older, tougher, and drawn from a new generation of actors who'd come of age in a world defined by cynicism and experimentation. Ron, with his reputation for decency, was an outsider. The others treated him as a curiosity, a living relic off television's golden age. Jokes and nicknames followed him everywhere, reminders that in their eyes he was still the sitcom kid, still defined by innocence. He smiled through the taunts, performing the part of the good sport, but each jab landed deeper than he let in. The hotel rooms after each shoot became his sanctuary and his confessional. Night after night, he replayed the mockery, convincing himself he could let it slide. He told himself he was learning resilience, that this was the price of transformation. But inside, the humiliation burned. Years later, he would admit that the experience changed him. The pain didn't break him. It hardened his resolve. He learned to keep his feelings hidden, to show nothing that could be turned against him. That ironclad self-control, so admired by colleagues and fans, was in truth born out of necessity. "I was forced to hide this," he would reportedly confess. The secret wasn't a scandal, but a deep unspoken shame. The pain of being ostracized for the very qualities he was taught to cherish. The lesson was clear. In Hollywood, decency was no defense. He had to build his identity from scratch, brick by brick, without expecting anyone's approval or understanding. Hollywood had taught him to armor himself, to hide every doubt and disappointment. But as Ron stepped into marriage, he would discover that no success, no devotion could shield him from the echoes of his past. The marriage behind the myth. In Cheryl Alley, Ron found what he'd been searching for since childhood. Safety. She wasn't from Hollywood, and that mattered to him. She represented everything his early years hadn't been: calm, private, and real. They met in college, long before the fame, when Ron was still trying to shake off the shadows of being the nice kid everyone underestimated. Cheryl saw him differently. She saw the gentleness that fame had not yet hardened, the intelligence behind his quiet nature. When they married in 1975, Ron believed he was closing the door on his chaotic upbringing, the long shooting days, the loneliness of child stardom, the silent bullying on the American Graffiti set that left him questioning his worth. But childhood wounds have a way of resurfacing, even when success tries to bury them. 4 years, the Howards' marriage was defined by small joys, family dinners, home projects, raising their children away from the glare of Hollywood. But beneath that domestic calm, cracks were forming. Ron's relentless drive to prove himself as a serious filmmaker became both his passion and his prison. Each new film demanded more of him, not just creatively, but emotionally. He'd come home physically present but mentally elsewhere, still editing, still chasing perfection, still hearing those old voices of doubt that told him he wasn't enough. Cheryl began to feel the distance first. It wasn't anger that built between them. It was silence. The man who once shared every idea and fear now carried them alone. He'd retreat into work, into planning, into control, not out of neglect, but out of fear. That, if he stopped moving, the insecurities of his youth would catch up with him. Friends noticed the shift, the way Ron seemed more guarded, the way Cheryl smiled through interviews, even when the fatigue in her eyes said otherwise. They loved each other deeply, but love can only survive so long without communication. He hid everything: the anxiety, the exhaustion, the moments when he felt like he was still that boy on set trying to please everyone. Had told Cheryl he was fine even when he wasn't sleeping. He smiled through interviews while privately wondering if he was becoming emotionally hollow. Every time he felt overwhelmed, he buried it deeper, afraid that admitting weakness would make it real. Years of hiding, of performing calm while chaos raged.